It's been almost 2 years since the original Viper V3 Pro released, and today we're finally getting an update with the Viper V4 Pro. There have been leaks all over the internet and also all over the entire world, but today is yet another day where we get to talk about brand new mouse tech that no one has ever seen before. You might think that they simply took the internals of the Razer V4 Pro and slapped it into the new Viper, but that's definitely far from everything. So definitely stick around for the entirety of this video because we're gonna get to talk about every single detail. But before we get into the full review, I do want to mention that this unit was sent out to me by Razer themselves. Rest assured, all my thoughts and opinions are my own and they have absolutely no say in my content. I've also only had the mouse for 1 full week, and whilst I did main the crap out of this thing for the past week, I definitely do want to make an updated video down the line when I have used it more extensively. I also want to mention that I had a product briefing with their head of peripherals and also the head of engineering, so I might be able to provide you with some information that you won't see anywhere else. So before we get into the in-depth review, let's talk about what is new compared to the Viper V3 Pro. Keep in mind that for almost all things I'm about to list, I'll more than likely get into more detail later in the video. Starting with the smaller stuff, it now comes with the Gen 4 optical switches that are inside of the Razer V4 Pro. It now also comes with a custom optical scroll wheel. The internal design of the mouse has been fully revised, boasting what Razer claims to make the mouse twice as strong when it comes to the structure, and whether that's true or not, you will find out in a bit. And whilst making sure the rigidity would be even better, the weight balancing was also a top priority when taking that into account, which we'll definitely talk about more in a sec as well. But because they were able to improve the rigidity so much, they then also shaved down 20% of the top shell thickness and also 10% of the thickness on the base plate, which means that they have now been able to shave down 5 grams on the mouse. So whereas the original Viper V3 Pro comes in at 54 grams, my personal Viper V4 Pro unit comes in at 5.4 grams less at a total of 49.0 grams. Alright, that's about it for all the changes. I'm just kidding. Obviously, you've already spotted the dome dongle up here that also comes with the Razer V4 Pro, but the tech inside of the mouse is absolutely different. Together with Pincer, they have implemented their own version of the brand new 3955 sensor, which is a brand new sensor which is now being called the Razer Focus Pro 50K Optical Sensor Gen 3. Holy shit, that's a mouthful. This is the first sensor with a process node to be based on a 55 nanometer process, which is twice as dense as something like the 3950 that's considered the best sensor on the market right now. Now, I normally don't go into tech specs and performance like this, but there is something more interesting that is very relevant and that I do want to talk about. Not only does this new sensor come with huge latency improvements, but their R&D team literally said, "Hold my AI goon tube," and single-handedly solved sensor synchronization. What Razer calls frame sync now makes motion sync fully irrelevant. And it does that with just-in-time scanning and reporting by having a brand new hardware block. And this new hardware block takes an external clock input, in this case your PC, and syncs it very precisely to the internal one. So now for the first time ever, everything is face locked and all clocks in the chain are synced to each other. This means that whereas without or even with motion sync, where some sensor frames will get lost by having to either wait for the MCU to prepare the data or the PC to poll, there are now no extra frames, and each single input from the sensor is directly polled as the entire input chain is now phase locked. All of these changes don't only drastically improve latency, but they also come with enormous power efficiency benefits that we'll talk about later in this video. And before we get any further, if you've been enjoying the video so far, I'd really appreciate if you'd hit that subscribe button and the notification bell right next to it, so that I get notified for any upcoming reviews of gaming mice or Hall effect keyboards and anything that's just the latest and greatest. Getting to the unboxing experience, this is what the box looks like. Inside of it, you obviously get your mouse, and you also get this dome receiver with 3 indicator lights on the front, which we're going to talk about later in the video as well. The receiver is very heavy and there is no chance of it sliding off of your desk compared to something like a file mouse receiver with their super stiff cable, for example. And inside of the box, you get your usual stiff USB-A to USB-C cable that I can personally not recommend plugging into the mouse directly, although this mouse now does support dual 8K, which means you can use it 8K wired. The build quality on this thing is as good as a mouse can possibly get right now. even compared to the Viper V3 Pro that I can get to squeeze a tiny bit and also creak if I press it really hard on the sides, this mouse absolutely does feel more rigid. I feel like this mouse is gonna pretty much last you forever, and there's absolutely no way that I could possibly get this thing to break. Yes, the base plate is a tiny bit thinner, as I've already mentioned, but although the top shell is also 20% thinner, there is no way of me feeling that. It feels incredibly rigid. There is zero side-to-side movements on the main buttons. There is zero switch grinding. The tolerances on all buttons are absolutely great, and we'll definitely get further down to detail with these side buttons and all the other buttons as well. And I have zero complaints. It is absolutely amazing. In terms of the weight, it comes in at 49 grams, and we've already mentioned the difference compared to the Viper V3 Pro. And whether you're going to feel a difference or not, me personally, I absolutely felt it right when I picked it up. I think that is not only because of the 5-gram weight difference, but is also because of the insanely good weight balancing on this mouse. It is perfectly balanced front to rear. I feel no sorts of heaviness anywhere, no matter how I hold the mouse. And even vertically on the Z-axis, it is balanced absolutely perfectly. Because of this perfect weight balancing, the mouse just feels even lighter than what it actually is. And from what I'm experiencing personally, compared to the Super Strike, which weighs over 60 grams and is incredibly front heavy, the difference is night and day. And getting into the shape, absolutely nothing has been changed. It is the same exact as the Viper V3 Pro. If you want a more in-depth look at the shape and comparisons, definitely make sure to check out my Viper V3 Pro review up here in the top right corner or in the description down below. And if you simply want a general sense of what it's like and whether it could work for your hand size, grip style, and personal preferences or not, here are the basics. In the current state of the market, this is what we would call a medium to large mouse. It's a very safe shape and design, with a center hump that feels a bit flatter towards the rear, and it just generally works with pretty much any grip style out there. It has really nice comfort grooves that feel super awesome to use and don't really dictate exactly where your fingers should be. It also doesn't flare out towards the front too much. And in general, I can recommend this type of shape for any type of grip with 18cm hands or above, unless you simply prefer bigger mice, because this is definitely not a small mouse. For me personally, with my 19x10cm aggressive claw grip or Pincer claw grip hybrid, I definitely have more than enough space here towards the front on the right side. My fingers end up near the front here, but there's still more than enough space still. And over on the left side, my thumb aligns perfectly with the side buttons and also with the sensor beneath. I personally feel super comfortable with this shape, and I definitely do prefer the shape over something like the GPX personally. But there is no way for me to tell you if this is the perfect shape and size for you or not. The coating is super rubbery. It is a tiny bit of a fingerprint magnet if you have more oily and sweaty hands. So if you care a lot about how your mouse looks, definitely get the white unit. But in terms of in-game feel and comfort, this mouse is absolutely insane in terms of the grip, even with really cold and dry hands like me. I never had any issues gripping the mouse, and I would only say that you would have to use grip tape if you have insanely wet and sweaty hands. They do actually include grip tape inside of the box as well, so if you're one of those people, you won't have to spend extra money on buying that. But keep in mind, these are probably only going to be a benefit if you have insanely wet and sweaty hands. The skates are 100% translucent PTFE skates with spacers underneath to even out the skates, so they are absolutely great. They're definitely not the fastest on the market, but they're also not as slow and muddy as something like the Super Strike skates, for example. Out of my personal experience, they have been pretty similar to the Unusual Wavesports Magic Ice skates that I've been trying so far, but I would say that they are ever so slightly slower. As you can see, the skate around the sensor is also rounded now. The rounding on the skates themselves is absolutely exceptional, and there are no ridges around the skates, just indentations. And yet again, I have nothing to complain about. In terms of the buttons, the main buttons are the same as the Razer V4 Pro, so they are super pingy and metallic and just loud. However, in terms of in-game feel, I really do like the implementation. It feels very snappy, it doesn't feel too heavy, it also is definitely spammable towards the front, and overall the click experience is pretty even throughout the entire click. It doesn't feel insanely heavy towards the rear, which is definitely not something that you can say about most mice. The pre-travel is very minimal, and there is only some excessive post-travel here towards the very front, and when using the mouse in game it feels absolutely great. The side buttons are not heavy at all, but they're also not super light. but the overall implementation is great. There is very minimal pre-travel and there is almost no post-travel, and I cannot press the side buttons into the shell or anything like that. The scroll is definitely tactile enough for you to be able to feel all the separate steps, whilst still not being heavy, and the overall implementation is pretty much perfect in my personal opinion. I have a crazy amount of grip on the scroll wheel as well in terms of the rubber, and the scroll click is not the heaviest that I felt, but it's also not light. And as always, here's a sound test. From all the mice that I've ever tried, the scroll implementation is pretty much the most premium feeling that I have ever tried, but holy shit do I hate that I have to hold the button to turn the mouse on and off. At least you don't have to do that very often with this mouse, because we're gonna get into the battery life in a bit, which is absolutely insane. But before we get into that, let's talk about the sensor position. If you don't know how this affects your aim, definitely check out the link down in the description below. As you can see, the sensor position perfectly matches the center of the side buttons, and when gripping the mouse and placing my thumb right in the center of the curvature, it also matches the height of the sensor perfectly. And finally, getting into the battery life, this has been the biggest improvement that I have ever seen on a gaming mouse. The battery life is genuinely fucking insane. Last time I checked my battery life about 4 to 5 days ago, it was at 45%. And checking my battery life right now, I'm at 32%. I have lost 13% on 2K polling over 5 days with 10 hours of usage every single day. It is absolutely fucking insane. My guess is that you could probably comfortably use this mouse with 8K polling, never turn your mouse off for 2 weeks straight. And if you're on 1K polling, you can probably use this thing up to 180 or 200 hours. It is genuinely insane. Now, getting into the actual performance of the mouse, can you feel a difference? In my case, with a 480Hz OLED monitor and an overall baller setup, when I compare it to all of the latest and greatest mice on my desk, I absolutely can feel a difference. But please keep in mind that this is coming from someone who's tested well over 100 mice, so you might not perceive it the same way. However, did it actually make me a better gamer? Probably not. But just like upgrading from a 360Hz to a 480Hz monitor, there's definitely an upgrade in terms of how your mouse feels in-game and how it just feels more intuitive and instant to use. And any sort of motion just feels absolutely instant, especially when it comes to those precise flicks and micro corrections. And my aim truly has been as confident as it could possibly be. As always, if you want scientific testing and you don't just want to rely on Razer's own marketing, please make sure to check out other reviewers like AimAdapt, Jera, and probably also Optimum once his video comes out. But since I neither have the means nor the confidence to post anything like that, especially somebody like Pincer over at Tech Power Up makes incredible reviews and has a super solid testing procedure that you should definitely check out once it's released. Getting into the software, yes, you could theoretically still use Razer Synapse, but we're finally on a WebDriver, baby. You can now head over to synapse.razer.com, where you can then click on your mouse and do all of your settings just like you would over in Razer Synapse on the software. I don't think that you'll be able to do firmware upgrades inside of the WebDriver, and you'll still have to use the site that I'm going to link down in the description below. But over here, you can customize all of your mouse buttons and also the button underneath the mouse. There's also Hypershift, which is pretty much just the functionality of having to hold one button and bind other buttons with 2 types of functions. And over here, you can change all of the functionalities for the receiver. By default, the first LED displays the quality of your current connection, which is going to be the wireless connection from the mouse to the receiver itself. The second indicator is for the battery level, and mine has been orange throughout the entire week because the battery life on this thing is just that insane. And over on the third LED, it indicates what polling rate you're currently at. You can customize all of these LEDs with these functionalities here, or in the performance tab, you can change how many DPI stages you want. I personally only use one DPI stage at 1600 DPI, and you can also use XY split DPI if that's something that you're interested in. You can change your polling rate here on the right side. Over in the power tab, I normally set my sleep mode to 1 minute, and the wake up behavior for this mouse is pretty much instant, so you can save even more power by having it this low. And for the low power mode, I would definitely recommend you setting it down to 5% so that your performance never gets impacted when you have a low battery life. By default, the medium liftoff distance now is a bit high. For me personally, even on the lowest setting, it still is a tiny bit high. I would prefer my liftoff distance to be a bit lower, and I've also tried it out with the asymmetric cutoff as well. So if you love insanely low liftoff distances, I probably wouldn't get this mouse at this point. And my guess on why the liftoff distance is a tiny bit high in general right now is because of the nightmare that they were going through with the Viper V3 Pro and people missing shots on high-stake tournaments just because their mouse stopped tracking right in the middle of a flick. But yeah, that's definitely not an issue anymore. And here with the dynamic sensitivity in the advanced tab, you can now do full custom raw acceleration on a hardware level, which might be interesting for some aim connoisseurs, but for most people, please just turn this off and don't think about it. You can also do sensor rotation down here below, and it goes from 0 all the way over to 44 degrees. Overall, I absolutely love everything about this WebDriver, and there's nothing missing from it in my personal opinion. And the only thing that I want them to improve is the default liftoff distance, which feels a tiny bit high at the moment. Before we get into the conclusion, let's talk about the all-new mousepad lineup, which, believe it or not, is the first cloth mousepad release from Razer in 5 years. This is the Gigantus V2 Pro. It comes in 5 different surfaces, ranging from a max control variant, which is apparently incredibly muddy, all the way to a blazing fast max speed version, which I sadly don't have a unit of yet. Depending on what surface you get a base that is either soft, a medium, or an actual hard base. These mousepads come in at $50 US or 60 euros. And these are indeed XL squares, coming in at 500 by 480 millimeters. The X and Y axis are pretty much identical here on my unit. The overall experience of the surface is very consistent. As you can probably see by the box, these mouse pads come in rolled, but out of all roll pads that I've ever received in my entire life, these have been the ones to lay flat the fastest. And when I say that, I literally mean I took it out of the box and it was as flat as a flat chip pad in an instant. Gone are the days of having to reverse roll your Zowie GSRSE and it looking like this after an entire month. The stitching is absolutely perfect as well, and the pad also doesn't slide on my desk. The base rubber foam that they're using also has much more of a rebound compared to that of any Slimflex or Poron base that feels like you're playing on a memory foam base at times. I only have the balance and the control version with me right now, and here's what I would compare them to. The balance feels a bit faster than something like an Artisan Zero in soft here, for example. Compared to most of the balance pad that you have ever owned, this probably will feel noticeably slower, and the control pad one being even slower than that. Compared to a Jupiter Pro, the control pad feels a bit faster than that, so my guess will probably be that the max control version feels a lot more like this Jupiter Pro. The most similar comparison that I can make is probably the Type 99 here in mid, which definitely feels pretty similar in terms of the overall gliding speed and experience. All of these pads don't really feel too textured. They're definitely very smooth and soft, but there's definitely also not a full-on lag in texture. You definitely do get some feedback. But if you're expecting a textured cloth pad, this is definitely not what this is. Overall, these pads are nothing groundbreaking or shocking for the enthusiast community, but from now on, whenever any of my friends in Europe ask me what cloth mousepad they should get, this is gonna be my #1 recommendation. And you know why? Because it's fucking Razer. There's not a single tech store that doesn't carry Razer at this point. And if you can't buy it locally at your MediaMarkt, Saturn, or whatever tech store your country carries, you'll be able to get it on Amazon, Galaxus, or any other online retailer of your choice. This is now the best readily available mousepad to buy in almost any country, and I can't describe how thankful I am for Razer pushing the normalization of enthusiast-grade mousepads. I wish we could have seen this at 50 euros here in Europe, but for the US, $50 US really ain't bad when comparing it to how insanely expensive it is to buy an artisan pad in the States these days. days. The only real competition that is just as readily available in the States would be the new ES lineup from Pulsar in collaboration with their acquirement of Lethal Gaming Gear, and their square pads are even more expensive at $55 before shipping. And in terms of the pro scene, I would not be surprised if the majority of all pros are going to be using this within the next half year, except for those who've already been using an artisan pad for a long time. Because compared to something like a SteelSeries QCK or any Logitech mousepad ever, this beats the ever-living crap out of it. Now, to the conclusion of the Viper V4 Pro. Who is this mouse for? Well, it's for certified ballers only, since this thing comes in at a whopping $160, which is shockingly still $20 less than the MSRP of the G Pro X2 Super Strike. But if you can actually afford it, I can recommend this to anyone with hands that are 18 centimeters or longer, or those who simply prefer bigger mice, since in the current mouse market, this is what we consider being a medium to large size. If you don't know how to measure your hand size correctly, make sure to check out the link down in the description below. But is it gonna be worth upgrading from the V3 Pro? Only if you've got any sort of issue with your copy and you can comfortably afford it. Either that, or if you're super schizo about performance, or you simply want the latest and greatest in motion latency and sensor tech. And since I can already see the comments down below asking if this is better than the Super Strike, in terms of build quality, weight balancing, skates, scroll wheel, side buttons, and how long this mouse is probably gonna last you, and also specs, this beats the ever-living shit out of the Super Strike. The absolute only thing that one could say is objectively better than the Viper V4 Pro would be the haptic inductive system over on the Super Strike, and the only way you're gonna benefit from it is by using one of the lowest actuation points. But by doing so, you genuinely have to change the way that you use your mouse in order to benefit from it properly, as I talked about here in my full review up in the top right corner or in the description down below. Anyway, shape is king. Please don't let marketing or tech specs solely make out your purchase decision. Yes, this might be the best gaming mouse ever in terms of raw performance, but if the size and the shape doesn't suit your hand and your personal preferences, you're still gonna play like absolute dog shit with this thing. My personal experience with the Viper V4 Pro has been absolutely nothing but amazing, and I'm already looking forward to using it in game again just because it feels that good to me personally. Anyway, that's about it for this video. Definitely make sure to hit the subscribe button and the notification bell right next to it if you're at all interested in gaming mouse and Hall effect keyboard reviews, and thank you so much for sticking all the way to the end. I'll see you guys soon and peace out.